questions and if you could put your questions in the chat and we kind of follow up at the end, that'd be awesome. And if you need to hop off, Sherry, if I'm still the host, we could still keep going. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I still have something I want to hop onto as well, but at the very least, I could spend a couple more minutes. So, thank you first for inviting me, Sherry. Sherry, like she said earlier, when some of you weren't online yet, Sherry's come on a couple of the field trips that I've created most recently to look at the intersection of housing and wastewater. And I've really enjoyed getting to know Sherry more. So I'm excited to speak to all of you about some of the work I've been doing on the Lower Cape, Lower and Outer Cape. So my name is Talitha Abramson. I am the Housing Resources Program Manager at a CDC that's located in Orleans called Community Development Partnership. And I work in a new initiative about 3 years old, no, maybe 4 years old, called the Lower Cape Housing and ADU Resource Center. It's a joint project between my organization, CDP, and another nonprofit, Homeless Prevention Council, both looking at housing in various capacities. We were funded by ARPA funding initially and started in 2022. Is it not? Why is my thing not going now? Are you seeing all of a sudden it's not engaging? Hold on. My slides are not moving forward. How do I get... Sherry, can you help me figure out how to get back to the view part?
Oh, go back to view and go to
I get into this. Okay, wait, let's see.
Did you get it?
I'm trying to toggle between getting out of this full view. This is annoying. I'm sorry, guys. I don't know why it's not moving because it was moving right before we got view. I mean, can you see you can see my slide, right?
Yeah.
We can.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't know why it's not. I'm not sure why it's not advancing at all. And it's not advancing on your end. It's not like it's my screen that's frozen, right?
No, we still have your cover slide.
Okay, I'm going to try and share instead of the PowerPoint slide, maybe just my screen. You know how you have different options of what to share?
Yeah, try that.
Okay. You see this? Did it change anything?
No, Talitha, why don't you try unsharing and then just reshare? Because it maybe something might have locked in the program.
Question is, how do you unshare? This is not what I wanted.
The little button in the bottom that says share, it's green, it's in the middle.
Yeah.
See if you can click out of that.
Advanced sharing options. Okay. It's not letting me.
There you go.
Did that do it? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. It's like as soon as one thing happens, you get like totally frazzled, and it's like, okay, content only. I'm just looking to see if something got. So let me try this again. That's on, right?
Yes.
Participants can now see your screen. Okay. What I don't get is why it's not. I'm like,
Talitha, do you want to try sending the deck to me and see if I can put it up from my screen?
Well, yeah, I can. Sherry has it too.
Okay, Sherry, do you want to do it?
I just don't understand why it's not moving forward with the arrows. Okay, let me do stop share. Let me try this one more time, guys. I wonder if it's like a... I'm gonna move closer to my router. I wonder if it's a Wi-Fi thing. Could that be it? Let me just see. The joys of media.
You might need to quit the PowerPoint and just relaunch the PowerPoint.
Okay, I will do that.
I would give that a shot. That's worked for me in the past.
All of a sudden, my screen is going completely wonky. Okay,
Sure.
so
Laura, I'm going to send you what she sent me. I'm having a little futz with it too, so I'll send it. Maybe you can pull it up.
All right, I'll pull it up on my and see if I can move it through in my email.
just trying to get out of my. I might just come off and come back on. Okay, that's what I'm going to do.
Okay.
Leave the meeting and come back. And then you can tell me to share again. Okay, Sherry?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Taking advantage of the break. Good to see you, Richard.
Good to see you, Daryl.
How you doing?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Hanging in.
There you
Life's
go.
full. It's definitely full. Still trying to keep ahead of the craziness in Aquinnah.
Yeah. Craziness on the island, craziness in the world.
Yeah, luckily it's a
Hey,
lot
Sherry?
calmer here in
Yes.
Aquinnah than
Sorry, guys. I just had to request access because the access was locked. I don't know if you give me access or Talitha does. Can you check? and see?
Talitha's going to have to give you access, but hopefully she'll work right now. So
All right.
I'm going to make her the host.
Okay,
Okay.
I'm thinking I'm going to go back to this and see if this works. Let's see. Beginning.
Okay, we see the whole PowerPoint.
That looks better.
Yes. Okay. I don't know what that was. That was so weird. Okay. So sorry, everybody.
No
It's okay.
problem. It happens.
We're all used to it.
Okay. Okay, so it's kind of giving you the history.
Hold on one
of-
sec. I'm going to record again.
Yep.
Oh, I'm still recording. Never mind.
So I work at this. Essentially, I run the ADU Resource Center part of this joint initiative. The other half is looking at keeping people housed through rental assistance and emergency funds and things of that nature. I'm the one staff person that's running basically, I think one of only 2 or 3 ADU resource centers in the entire state at this point. The state is really looking to build more of those, is what I have heard, but I'm the only active one to my knowledge on the Cape right now, and I think the other one is in Mayor Wu's office in Boston, and there may be another one in the Beltway area. So in the 2.5 years I've been in this role, and what I do in this role is work with homeowners who want to build an ADU, and I also work with municipal staff to try and make it easier in the towns to build an ADU. It became apparently clear within 2 months of my job that the biggest hurdle next to cost of construction was wastewater. And 6 months prior to getting this job, we actually contacted the center ourselves wanting to build our own ADU, and wastewater was one of our barriers. And so it became this rabbit hole I went down, and it's been a rich learning experience ever since. So my mantra is now P is key to unlock housing in ADUs. So my parents sent me these photos because they said that my work started way earlier than I thought. My background's in women's studies and in social justice education, so wastewater was never on my radar of what I was going to use my liberal arts education for, but I find this to be one of the biggest equity issues on the Cape in terms of keeping people housed or creating housing for people of all income strata, all age groups, all racial backgrounds. This is a massive issue that we're facing, not just about the water quality and the water pollution, but that how it impacts housing and every other issue with workforce development, tourism, economic development. So this fits squarely in what my training has been. I wanted to start with a little gratitude and some remembering, and also an expansion of kind of the traditional paradigm we look at these issues through. So this is a list, and it's not exhaustive, but of the people I've learned from. And like I realized Laura's not on there, Sherry's not on there. This is from a couple of presentations ago. I am in no means an expert in wastewater. I'm not even an expert in housing. What I think I'm really good at is bringing people together from all walks of life and all sectors to come to the table to look at intersectional issues. And this is a really rich one. And so that's the work I've been doing, is to facilitate sector dialogues around these issues. And in order to do that, I felt like I needed a level of understanding, and these folks in various fields have really helped me immensely, including Hilda and Earl, who are on the call today. One of the things I wanted to talk about was that we traditionally look at things in silos in this culture, and that is kind of where these issues become intractable in our minds. And one of the emerging fields since the 60s has been systems thinking. And one of the even more kind of, I wouldn't say it's newer, but newer to, I think, the dominant culture is this concept of indigenous systems thinking. There is a book written by Jesse Gray Eagle that is about $26. It's an ebook online. It has totally changed my viewpoint on how to approach this work. And so this is some excerpts from his book, which talks about how kind of the Western culture really loves to pursue complexity and as a proxy for intelligence, and that we build these layers upon layers of analytics and oversight, regulatory, believing that this precision is what's going to bring us the justice. And I think it's actually that precision almost that is the encumbered nature that we're working against. And he talks about in healthcare and education and social services, there's all of these intricacies and layers of detail, codes, outcomes, data, tracking that then become kind of the barrier in a way to looking transformationally at how to solve these issues. And that from the indigenous perspective, systems move, measure, and spend in our world, but they do not remember. And so this piece of about time being cyclical and not linear in indigenous cultures, and how we need to really build with time and history being at the core, is something I'm learning more and more about. And so I wanted to talk about where I'm located on the Cape is in West Harwich, and we sit on the Bell's Neck Conservation area perimeter. And this is an extremely rich ladder for its water. We have brackish reservoirs, we have a tidal river, we have freshwater reservoirs, we have a herring ladder, all of which are impeded by cyanobacteria every year. The Herring River is unbelievably polluted. And it's a place we bought our house to be next to, not understanding any of this 6 years ago, that we can't even walk our dogs past this because it's so toxic, right? So to me, it's a personal issue that's right in my backyard. In us wanting to build an ADU, we don't want to add to that pollution that's going into our waterway. But when I went and dug a little deeper about the history of this area, they have unearthed clay pots and pottery all the way back to 100 AD. And they said there was a stone gouge that was used for woodworking far back as 2000 BC. And it basically, dating back 5,000 years, was a summer fishing camp for the indigenous people. So to me, this is the history that I am currently living on and with in our neighborhood. And I love this quote from Ramona Peters, who's a member of the Bear Clan of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, founder of the Native Land Conservancy, talking about how in their culture, they name themselves after the land they live with. We're not only breathing in, we're also drinking from the water that's flavored by that very land. Whatever is deposited in that soil is in the water, is in us. So we are all one thing, and we name ourselves after the place that is our nurturing, that sustains our life. So here's this one perspective that's beautiful in my mind. And then I learned that Bell's Neck is the name of the person, the white person who basically claimed that land from the indigenous and named it after themselves, right? So there's these like interesting paradigms that we're in the middle of trying to solve these issues. And I'm really finding a lot of value in the indigenous perspective and how that can help shift how we work on these issues. So this is another quote I just thought speaks to our work with water quality is, no matter how deep we bury the past, it always wells back up. So I find it best to understand rather than fear, is what this Samantha Shannon says. And so I thought this, image of a septic tank was pretty appropriate for that quote. So I wanted to start with remembering the past on the Cape. And I'm curious if people want to put in the chat how many people were aware of or remember New Alchemy Institute in Falmouth. and how many people were aware of the Harwich Solar Aquatics pilot at the Harwich Town dump that was from 1988 to 1992. I'm not sure how much information got over to the island, but I've been studying this project for a while. This is a picture of our town dump and raw septage that was coming from residential, commercial, medical facilities all over the town, being dumped at the transfer station in a coarse sand unlined lagoon. I'm not sure for how many years, but this was how they were dealing with their waste. And it was abutting a 20-acre freshwater pond on the backside of the transfer station. They were getting a lot of heat and attention from the DEP to figure out a different way to deal with this. And they contacted John Todd, who was colleagues with Hilda and Earl, who now run the Green Center. And he developed with the town board of health and the select board being on board with this, a really innovative way to deal with the waste back in 1988. And so he basically looked at mimicking nature and designing these cylinders, these fiberglass cylinders, which you can see some of these at the Green Center still in Falmouth, to mimic different water bodies on the Cape, whether it was a river, a bay, a creek. He basically studied and took different strata of animal kingdom representation and put them into each cylinder and deposited the waste at one end of this kind of train that you can see. It was about 21, 22 cylinders. And the darkest end you can see is where the waste was initially dumped. And as it got further down through these different ecosystems, essentially, they cleaned the waste till it was potable drinking water standards. And it was usually within 10 days that cleaning would take place. And it was simply with sun, water, and every kind of representation of the stratas of animal kingdom, organisms to fish to plants. And you can see that it expanded as a pilot over these 4 years. They ended up getting a greenhouse for the cold weather to be able to house it inside. And it became this really beautiful, pretty big point of pride in our community. And there was a lot of, a lot of drama around this pilot involving the DEP and other entities. But in the end, the DEP approved this technology to move forward. And yet it's not at our dump anymore. The project from the town perspective consists of 5 banker boxes that I unearthed at our town DPW attic with all the blueprints and the reports and the documentation. The whole system was dismantled and we decided to go with shipping our waste to the Yarmouth facility. So this was the beginning of my kind of rabbit hole and my interest in learning about, oh my God, this was 35, 40 years ago, we were looking at this. This is a picture of John Todd holding up the water at the end to show how clear it was. And this is an article from 1988 in the Cape Codder, which no longer exists. You can see where there's a whole article about development where Lieutenant Governor Tsongas was asking not to have any development, commercial or residential, take place until they figured out about the drinking water supply on the Cape. And at the same time, we're talking about, how do we clean our water in the article next to it. So back then we were looking at housing and water issues, right? And some of the people I'm working with have been around the table for 30 years, still talking about these issues. So fast forward to current day, this is where I come in with looking at housing and how ADUs are a tool for the housing crisis we're in. Right now we have this disconnect between our current housing stock, what's available and already built, the zoning and regulations across the whole country, let alone on the Cape and the islands, our actual household sizes these days versus last generation, the generation before, and what's this current generation coming up? What are their values and priorities? Do they even want to own a house? Do they want to rent? Are they a tiny house person? You can see that the housing from 1950s, that whole Levittown kind of ideal, actually matches today's household sizes better than the houses we're currently building. Back in the Levittown days, on average, the Levittown house was anywhere from 700 to 900 square feet. Right now we're building around 2,400 square foot homes. You can see in the bottom right in that advertisement, it was 175 square feet per person. They were building a 700 square foot home, a lot of what we see across the Cape in that size, for a family of 4. And this is just another way of looking at it. They were 4.5 rooms, usually small lots, and living room was 12 by 16. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath on average, and they usually started around $8,000. Fast forward to 2025, we're building these mammoth houses, 6 to 8 rooms, larger lots, many more bedrooms and baths, and, you know, looking at 300, 400,000 in some areas just to start. There's not starter homes these days for the generation coming up. This is a visual to show us how much houses have changed in size since 1980. We've basically added a Levittown house from 1,600 square feet going up to 2,400 square feet. And the median home price currently post-COVID in any of these states is anywhere from no less than 560,000, right? Let alone on Cape and islands, totally different. We'll get into that. So currently, more than the majority, 64% of the existing housing in the US is single family detached homes. And that's as of 2005. Yet 73%, some stats say 83, but the one I have listed below is 73% of the households come 2030. In 4 years, 73% will have no kids. So here we are building 3, 4-bedroom houses for potentially 3/4 of the population will be 1 or 2 people in a house. And you can see that here, 35%, let me just move my thing here. 35% of the households are 2 people. If you assume that's a couple and they only require 1 bedroom, and then another 29% are 1 person living alone, that adds up to 64% of the population could make do with a 1-bedroom house, whereas 65% of the houses are 2+ bedroom. And if this is a generation that's valuing living smaller footprint, being environmentally conscious, there's only 11% of the housing stock that's 1 bedroom only. We are not creating smaller houses. And yet that's what the housing, what the household sizes are saying we need. So there's this mismatch. And that's partly the reason for the crisis, right? But on Cape, and on islands and in other rural areas in the US, there was a post-COVID rush towards these rural areas, right? Post-pandemic migration that has reshaped the rural population. And so you can see that on average across the United States, typically the 3 years before COVID, people were leaving rural areas with a net outflow of 100,000. And after COVID, people were moving to the rural areas with an inflow of 670,000. That's a massive change. And when you think of, all of a sudden, hold on a minute. Please go. Now I've frozen again. Oh, okay. Most of that increase is going to areas that are relying on septic. And we're not the only region that is facing the repercussions of having septic for so long and not realizing what it was doing to the water. All over, if you do a search for any place that you enjoy to visit, that's usually a tourist area that has beautiful kind of nature destinations, you put in cyanobacteria, anywhere across the country for the most part, they're facing this if they are relying on septic in those areas. So it wasn't just that there were all these people rushing to buy second, third homes, but that then increased the value of the home. So in 2019, that's when we moved here to West Harwich. We bought our house for $340,000 for, a 3/4 acre. And it's now valued at double that, and you can see here from Barnstable County figures, I know in Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, it's like through the roof. You guys are like the canary in the coal mine where it's much more extreme what's going on for you. But here on the Cape, you could buy a house for $410,000 median sales. And by 2023, it was another 400,000 more for that same single family home. Condos, you can't find things for under $400,000 for the most part. And Orleans average home selling price is around $1.2-1.3 million, right? People, we can't even attract doctors. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir. You guys all know this. It's like town managers can't even afford to live here in the towns that they're managing. So this is just a quick visual of saying, based on Barnstable County stats, and this is 2023 figures, but the people who make the world go round, whether it's school teachers, firefighters, home health aides, dishwashers, restaurant workers. And I think this is pretty generous because it's basically saying they have $20,000 saved down for a down payment and they have an average monthly debt of only $300, which I don't think is anyone in this entire reality at this point. Everybody's got way more debt and can't afford to save for a down payment. But let's say the home health aide can afford a $115,000 house, or even the accountant at $300,000. I always do a search. This is a little outdated by 2 months, but I do a search on Zillow, and you can see on the left all of the properties under 300,000 across New England, essentially through to New York. There's a lot of red dots there. As you get out to our peninsula, there's a lot less. And you can see on yours, there's one on Martha's Vineyard and there's none on Nantucket. And so when you look at the properties that are available on the Cape, under 300,000, we have a literal RV on cinder blocks that's seasonal. We have a motel room in Orleans. So that's what the home health care worker could afford. That's usually doesn't have, it's not full, it's a seasonal option as well, probably with a kitchenette. And then there's cottages in Harwich that are 200 square feet. Again, not full kitchen, seasonal, water turned off. But these are almost at the price where we paid for our house. Now, this house is the one single family that's year round, 10 feet from the cliff that's going to fall off. And we keep following this in Eastham because the owner has no plan for the house on the edge. And when that house falls into the ocean, so does the septic, right? So everywhere we look, I mean, I feel like every time I open the newspaper, there's always a housing and a wastewater issue right next to each other. We can't avoid it. So in terms of this larger housing crisis, there's many tools to use. There's missing middle, incremental kind of development, looking at duplexes, triplexes, commercial property conversion, new construction, and then there's ADUs. And that's, where I came in, hoping this would be a tool we could use specifically on the Cape. But what hinders all of those tools is, especially in coastal and rural communities, is this reliance on septic and our satisfaction with having two tools available, and that's it, and not exploring anything else beyond the paradigm of sewer, septic, and within septic is that IA, innovative advanced septic. But essentially we have two tools that we're approved to use and that we are saying, based on how we're working currently, that this is acceptable. And so I'm challenging that notion that we need to think outside of the septic box. So this is from a recent Boston Globe, I'm trying to move this thing down here, Boston Globe editorial about how septic regulations are impinging on housing. Amy Dane, a researcher, surveyed 187 Eastern Massachusetts municipalities back in 2004. Only 26 were served fully by sewer. So all the other cities and towns had at least some that were served by septic. And so more than 30 greater Boston communities relied at least partially on septic. I still think of Boston as, well, they don't understand this because they're on sewer, but they are not fully sewered. And so this is impacting them as well. And so you can see this was the editorial on October 12th, if you want to go find it. We don't need 100 different septic system rules. Come on. Oh, come on, please don't. Okay. I'm going to have to, hold on. Okay, let's see. Okay, so on the Cape, on average, 85% of us are dependent on septic. I don't know the stats for Martha's Vineyard. If you guys could put that down, do you have sewer anywhere? I'm totally ignorant on this, I will admit. But put it in the chat because I want to be able to use this in other presentations.
I
And
don't know about anybody else, but for me, the chat's disabled.
oh, is it?
Um,
Okay,
I can message you directly, but I can't
interesting.
send out
Okay.
a chat to everybody. But the 3 down island towns do have sewer in some capacity.
Okay. Good to know. Okay. So when you look across the state, if you average it out, a quarter of the households across our state and across the US on average are on septic compared to 85%. But when you look at where it relates to septic or cesspool based on kind of region, you can see New England is one of the largest, and as well as the South. So we have about 51% still on septic systems by 2013. That's an outdated figure, but it shows you that we definitely are dealing with this more so than in other areas. Come on, work with me. Why is this? Okay. So this is the Boston Globe article. And in that, they talk about a project that was approved for 120 units, but when they actually abided by the local septic and the wetland rules, it was only able to build 58 units, right? And this is where they're starting to understand the wastewater challenges to housing, but they're really looking in this article and at the DEP level and the Executive Office of Housing at multifamily. And I'm really wanting to get the word out that this is impeding ADUs. This is impeding small development in the backyard, trying to house somebody's grandmother, somebody's adult child, right? So this is where my mantra, P is key, comes in. So I'm sure you guys have all heard, what is an ADU? It's the buzzword of the day. They just had a press conference from the governor last week about trying to make them easier to build. We've always had these. We've built these for generations. We've just called them different things. But as soon as we come up with a new name, we seem to come up with a lot more regulations. And I'm hoping that as a state, we're about 10 years behind California, who really paved the way, and Oregon and Washington as well. When they first came out with their ADU by right legislation, it did not move the needle whatsoever because it was so restrictive. And it took them over the decade since to really have 1, 2, 3 laws passed every year to basically make it less restrictive and easier to build an ADU. So right now, 61% of ADUs are built for multi-generational housing. 1 in 5 Americans now share their home with adult children. I know Sherry can relate to this and a lot of other people all over the Cape and the islands. But I also think people came home from COVID to, kind of stay in place with family, and a lot of them couldn't afford to move back out. So I think a lot of it we can see is like this post-COVID with the housing crunch has just changed how people are as a family. So this is the work that I do at the Lower Cape ADU Resource Center. I've probably worked with over 150 homeowners. We've had over 200 reach out for assistance for, technical assistance with specific projects. I give a lot of info sessions like this at Council on Aging centers and churches. And so I've probably talked to like a couple hundred people as well, just in different formats to educate them about, the ADU process. How do you, contact your town government? What are the hurdles? How do you get financing? Things like that. So my role is really to demystify a complicated process for somebody who's not a natural builder, a licensed builder. And then I'm also there to support staff in the town departments of like planning, housing, health, and share best practices from my research across the country. And also, most recently, to start really pushing this issue of what are we going to do about the wastewater hurdle, and see who is on board to explore this with me. So just another visual of looking at septic and sewer being our only 2 tools right now that are mainstream approved, mainstream used, and acknowledging many towns still have homes that are on cesspools. What do we do about that? A lot of those people who are on cesspools, those are cottages that they've lived in their whole life. They're seniors on fixed income. They are terrified to let people know they still have a cesspool and that they're going to have to spend money they don't have to upgrade this. I've had countless conversations with people in my town and elsewhere. And this is where it becomes an issue of equity and displacement. And so I've talked to AARP about this. This was something that was not on their radar, about fixed income seniors being terrified of being displaced off Cape due to either the cost of sewer coming to their house or having to upgrade their cesspool to an IA system. And when sewering is done, the stats I've heard from the various meetings I've sat through is that we're only going to be sewering 40 to 50% of the Cape. We can't get around these, beloved pond neighborhoods where sewer is just not meant to be designed to go. So what are we going to do for the houses that are actually sitting on these ponds with septic that's going directly into that water? We need other tools. And some of these towns have 16 phases in their sewer project that will not be done until the years 2050 to 2067. So I did the math. At town meeting, when these towns are voting on these sewer projects by phase, which is not transparent to show the actual entire cost of a sewer project for a town, an 18-year-old that may just start to show up at that town meeting or not even want to vote at a town meeting, they will be saddled with that debt in 2067. They will be 60 years old. And that project will be ending the first completion phase. But that means all the phases have been built. So then probably phases 1 through 6 are going to have to be renovated and rebuilt by that point, because we will be how many years out, how many decades out. So this is like, when you look at these things systemically, it starts to have a different feel, you get different information and a different response with citizens, right? So I started to develop some tools to help people understand what are all the common ADU septic hurdles and costs. This isn't really broken out anywhere for people. I started to ask builders and town people and sanitarians and whatnot. There's anywhere from a Title V inspection to a septic design and perk test to needing to add an extra tank. As soon as you have an ADU, it's a second dwelling unit. And so now there's regulations that require either a tank and tank series or a 2-compartment tank. And even if you had your septic upgraded 3 years ago, if it's a single tank and you're building an ADU, you may be required to add this additional tank, which involves landscaping, ripping up your yard, install costs, and that's the minimum for a lot of people. Some people have to have their septic completely, upgraded to a brand new traditional septic, which could be the middle ground of like 15 to 35,000, depending on your property. Some people need an innovative alternative system, which can run anywhere from, usually now it's 40 to 100,000, depending on your property. And so I list this all out for people to know, but also to just show these are the costs that it's the most expensive part of an ADU is the wastewater. Is you haven't even hit the top of the foundation, and it's sometimes the first 2 stops are a red light for people to go forward. So I did a survey
Lisa,
of.
can I interrupt you for one
Yeah.
second? I made you host. I'm going to take back the host, so you might have to start resharing, just so that maybe I can fix the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to make you the co-host, not the host.
Okay, that's great.
Okay, so now you should be able to share. You might have
still
to
see
start
it, right?
sharing again. Yeah,
Okay.
I can still see it.
And is the chat operating?
Um,
I thought I saw the chat.
yeah, I think you had control of the chat, so that's why I'm trying to take it back. And John Stanwood had a question. John, are you still here? Do you still have a question? Let me play with the chat, and I'll see if I can get it going.
Hi, I am. I just wanted to mention and echo your sentiment when you were talking about people not wanting to talk about their cesspools. That people who are cost burdened to update their septic systems, we are starting to actually consider that a form of housing insecurity at Island Housing Trust. I
when
just wanted to
Laura, I
mention
think it was
how
Laura that
important that
shared that
is.
with me. I was so excited to hear that in terms of just this reframing of it, right?
Yeah.
So I've started to use that on the Cape because I don't hear that necessarily among like people in the field. I hear the fear from the homeowners, and it's sad because a lot of them they don't want to be part of the problem, but they can't figure out how to be part of the solution, right? It's because
Mhm.
we don't have enough tools available that are affordable. And this, so thanks for sharing that. This is a subset of my ADU clients. I sent out 130 surveys inquiring about the status of their project. I got 24 back, so I don't know what that is in terms of like reliability of a research study, but out of the 24, 22 are not building an ADU. So one has built an ADU. I'm not sure what the maybe is if they're kind of in the permitting phase, but 22 have not moved forward with this. And this was, confirmation for me of what I knew from talking to people one-on-one, but I needed to see it in more of an aggregate. So the next question I asked was, were they on sewer? None of them were on sewer. All of them were on septic still. One of the things that, people have asked me is like, should we just focus on sewered areas to promote ADUs? Well, that's very few areas right now specifically on the outer Cape. It's like non-existent except for P-Town. And they have their own set of issues just in terms of the affordability of building and the space in P-Town. But I mean, for the most part, we're all on septic. There's some sections of Harwich and Chatham and Orleans, but it's not the majority of the towns. So when I asked what out of those
Letha,
20,
can I just jump in here to
yeah,
just piggyback onto what John said? So
yeah,
just to level set for this group, um, I know that Talitha's presentation is specific to ADUs, but what she's saying laps over into what the MVC has identified as a primary issue here. And what John just referred to is that we have a substantial amount of low and moderate income homeowners and low and moderate income renters who are in homes that are what's called naturally occurring affordable housing, which means they're usually older homes. They were bought many, many years ago before when the prices were still affordable, and the inability to upgrade their wastewater systems because of cost to compliant systems is a reason why folks are losing their homes or moving off the island. And that's been identified as a primary stressor on the community. So as you're listening to Talitha's talk about ADU, just know that on this island, this extends to a pretty large demographic here of folks who are in naturally occurring affordable housing, those are not deed restricted units. Those are units that folks have owned for many, many years or have been renting out for many, many years. So this applies to a much bigger swath than just accessory dwelling units.
I appreciate you saying that. And I feel like I'm in an ADU resource center, but I see this as tools for all housing at this point. But my role is to really advocate for the ADU piece. And the people who are living in these small, naturally occurring affordable houses, I mean, that's like the culture of our neighborhoods. When those people leave because of this issue, they're not choosing to leave this area for their own reasons. And that's the thing that makes me so upset. Because I think there are simpler, quicker tools, and we're choosing not to look at them. So when I asked the homeowners who did not build an ADU yet, what was their biggest hurdle? 18 out of the 22 said septic upgrade cost challenges. 2 said sewer. So together that's 20 out of 22 said wastewater. Construction was up there, which I knew, and lack of financial assistance. So I've been talking with people at the state level about what types of financial assistance actually can help people to build these. And I'm hoping that some of that got to the level that they're now saying there's going to be incentives coming down from the top. But this to me was not news, this graph. It just validated that I was picking up on the right feedback from these folks. So there's a great book and a great organization called Strong Towns. I highly recommend if you don't know about it. They look at incrementalism and small infill development and how to create strong, lovable, walkable communities that are solvent, right? And so they look at quick, constant, repeated small actions that anybody can do. And the 4-step process for people investing in their town is to basically humbly observe where people in your community struggle, ask the question, what is the next smallest thing we can do right now to address that struggle? Do that thing, do it right now, and repeat it. And to me, when we're talking about innovative wastewater, we'll get into like urine diverting, composting, circular sanitation. This to me is quintessential, the next smallest thing we can do to address this struggle right now. So I love their framing of that. Let's see, let me go back. So I had this visual of these two overlapping crises where we had this conversation first, I think, when we started the Zoom and people were coming on, that it's usually seen as housing versus wastewater, or housing versus water quality in the conversations we have. And to me, I want to see it as this like rich intersection of how do we get both things accomplished. And so to me, I feel like innovative wastewater through circular sanitation, eco-sanitation, whatever you want to call this, emerging, it really isn't emerging, but in our mindset, it's emerging technology. I think it's our third way out. And we need to be seeing third ways more than just either or in the way we're approaching this. So this is a visual I've loved about expanding our paradigm when we look at these issues. It's from the Burkana Institute and Margaret Wheatley, and I'm forgetting the other woman that worked on this with her, basically looking at how does a dominant system come to be, and then how does a new system of influence come into play, and how do they interact, right? And to me, I look at the dominant system right now as we're looking at innovative alternative has now become a dominant system with sewer. It's the two main conversations we're having about wastewater in relation to housing. They didn't used to always be like that. Sewer before 1880 was not the dominant system, right? But it's been in existence since 1880s. And innovative alternative has been just a couple of decades, right? So the new system of influence that's coming into more and more prominence is this look at circular eco-sanitation fixtures that are within a home that are mimicking nature and they are collecting the nutrients. And so I see this as a way to frame our work and to figure out where our role is in this, right? So there's this pioneer group over on the left that starts, they're kind of the trailblazers. And I look at Hilda and Earl and Laura, who's had this toilet for how many years, Laura? Have you had your composting toilet? Oh,
sorry, I didn't
Okay, so
realize
you
my
can
mic
answer
was off.
questions up until then?
Yeah, 30. It's been 30 years, actually.
So you guys are like cutting edge, trailblazing, whacking up a hill, right? And eventually there's enough people that get educated from these pioneers, painstaking work, that there begin to be connections and a naming and a set of like networks that start to form. And that's what I'm excited to talk about that's happening on the Cape right now. We need to be able to not have these fits and starts and kind of like single town pilots. And there needs to be this kind of tapestry that's woven across towns, across regions, across the Cape to the islands, that we're informing our work. It's strengthening because of that. And so this is what I'm using to basically inform my work moving forward. So I kind of just talked about this in terms of that the dominant paradigm are these two kind of buckets of septic, including IA and sewer, and hoping that our future reality is that what is, emerging actually becomes the new dominant reality and becomes more just the mainstream use of this technology that I'm going to talk about. So the interesting thing is when I talk about this in like housing circles, when I talk about it with municipal staff who aren't really familiar with what eco-sanitation and circular sanitation is, they often say, well, there's like an ick factor. People don't want to really pursue this. People are grossed out by it. They don't understand it. So I ask people, if you are not pursuing an ADU, are you interested in learning more about emerging wastewater solutions? And 17 out of the 24 were interested, right? I had a couple come on my tours. And when I talk to homeowners, if it's between the option of not housing your kid or, because I've never met somebody that's like, I don't want to house my kid because I don't like that toilet enough. Like that just has not been the conversation, right? The conversation is they're extremely frustrated. They're very angry that they can't house their parent. They can't take care of their parent. They can't house their worker. Anyone who's calling me for the most part has somebody in mind that they want to house in that ADU. And there are a minority, but it's a heartwarming minority that is just building that ADU to be part of the solution to house anybody, but they don't know who it is. They just want to house a year-round person, right? But all of that is like, these aren't just like plug and play theoretical tools that you can just throw into a region that's sewered because that's easier. It's like housing is sacred. It's relationships, it's family, and we should be able to house people if the technology is there and be able to use it. And that's what I'm like, it's what I get frustrated with, is that the people who want to use this technology are not allowed to at this point in the easiest way. So by expanding this paradigm, it's looking at how can we unlock housing by using this technology and clean our water quicker. So this was a slide I added to just kind of show that there is some of this technology under this umbrella of eco-sanitation, circular sanitation that is approved, like composting toilets. There are only 2, to my knowledge, composting toilets approved. So, there are more than 2 companies making composting toilets, but only 2 have been approved. And the downfall is that they are not attached to a nitrogen credit. So when people ask about, well, why aren't people in the towns pushing this as a strategy? Well, if there's not a credit attached, there's no incentive for the town. It's more on the homeowner that is like really dedicated to not adding extra pollutants into their water. That's going to be the person that wants that Phoenix composting toilet. It's not, the town's not benefiting if that person, they're benefiting because the nitrogen's not going in it, but the way we play the game, they're not getting that credit from that fixture yet, right? Urine diverting or urine collecting toilets are not yet approved by the DEP. It's in progress with the Falmouth pilot. Hilda and Earl can maybe talk to that if we have time, but they also are not attached yet to a nitrogen credit. We're hoping there can be a new category the DEP recognizes that's a source separation fixture category, that under that could be composting, incinerating, and when urine diverting or urine collecting fixtures are approved, that they all sit under this category that is a fixture that takes the waste, does not allow it to hit the groundwater, diverts it, and that they all would get nitrogen credits similar to an IA system, an IA septic system. Right now, they're not in that category. So that's one of the things we're wanting to expand the paradigm on. Incinerating toilets, according to DEP guidance in 2022, I need to just check that it hasn't changed since they, became more restrictive. They were allowed by right, not nitrogen credit to my knowledge. And my understanding is that a plumbing inspector in a town can say that's not allowed, even though they're allowed by right. According to conversations I've had with health agents in different towns in my area of the Cape, there's one health inspector that is not, a plumbing inspector that is not allowing incinerating toilets. So the question is, there's hurdles at the municipal level with staffing and politics. There's hurdles at the state level. There's hurdles at the regional level. And we need this kind of nuanced, networked approach to widening the pathways for everybody. So one of the exciting things I was able to do this year is basically corral a lot of municipal and regional leaders, staff in town departments, community champions, people on different committees who were interested in my one-on-one conversations about this, but those don't really go that many, places. They were interested in joining a network where I promised that I would share the people that I learned from and have them kind of get a baseline understanding of innovative wastewater eco-sanitation. I created educational trips for them to go visit Mass Tech, the Green Center, various ADU tours on a school bus, looking at that intersection of wastewater and how it impedes housing, specifically ADUs. And so I brought them together for their first meeting in November. We're meeting for at least 6 times. I'm hoping it's just a continual group until we figure this out. I have about 27 people from the Lower and Outer Cape, And we called it the Wayfinders Impact Network. And partly why I named it that was I wanted them to find this third way, right? I wanted them to, and it's not just like one way, it's like, how do we find all the different levers of change at any level that we can push and move the needle on this? And so I love the concept of a wayfinder with this fearless imagination and dreaming and radical new ways. Like status quo thinking is not going to get us to the 2030 goals the governor has of 8 to 10,000 ADUs in 4 years, right? It's just not. We need to act and think differently. So we mapped in our first meeting all the different committees that were represented. And some people wore multiple hats, but we had, you know, different roles from engineers to artists, ADU center clients, builders, remodelers. We had basically every town. I think Truro is the only town we don't have somebody represented yet. We had Barnstable. We have some people from Wareham that want to join in, right? It's an exciting group of people, and they are all on board to figure this out together. And that's the thing that just, you know, it's my like early Christmas present, I feel like. So we looked at what's an impact network in terms of why are we coming together across sector, across silos? We need to, for an intersectional issue of wastewater and housing, we need to look at things structurally and systemically, and with, you know, diverse combinations of people and skill sets. And so we went around the room and asked, what are all the skills and unique gifts that you can offer to this collective? And it really, I think, energized people to understand what they could offer, who was next to them, what they were going to learn from them. They walked away really, I think, hopeful from that first meeting. So one of the things they did before coming to that meeting was they either went on a VIP tour, which was a tour of Mass Tech in the Green Center, looking at this innovative toilet technology, or, and this is a picture of us at Mass Tech. I had health agents, health inspectors, builders, ADU clients, town planners, directors of natural resource, you name it. There we are at the Green Center. We also did a Wayfinder tour on a funk bus, which is this party bus out in P-Town. That's a fun ride, looking at various ADUs in different construction phases. And each site, we talked about the wastewater challenge and the wastewater costs. So that had about 24 people on that tour. We did it twice. There you can see the funk bus. So it's also getting them out of their offices, getting them to interact with different people and different expertise, and to hear from, we had about 4 or 5 experts. This funk bus tour, we had a guy that happened to be in Hyannis wanting to interview Hilda and Earl from Australia. And he was an eco-sanitation doctoral student. And so he was on board from Australia. That was the one that Sherry was on. So we had Martha's Vineyard. We had people from Burlington, Vermont, from the Wasted Company that's in charge of taking the urine from the Falmouth pilot. That was an awesome funk bus tour. And people really said it totally changed their perspective about multiple issues, right? So this was our first meeting we held in Harwich. About 17, 18 people showed up. And this was our most recent VIP tour on Monday, where we had State Rep Luddy, who invited State Rep X and State Rep Diggs, and State Rep Moakley's aide, Joey, was there. And the word that kept coming out of all those state reps' mouths was, this is mind-blowing. Like, why don't more people know about this? They got it. They totally got it. So that was really exciting. So this is the questions we're going to focus on in this regional working group. The WIN group is to, you know, do we want to expand or replicate the Falmouth pilot in other towns? What can we learn from Falmouth? What are creative strategies we can co-design to move the needle on this issue? It doesn't have to necessarily be exactly what Falmouth is doing. The idea I've thrown around is this concept of a you do you, a urine diverting ADU unit, where it's for the early adopters. It's not something that's mandated. It's if they want to do this, if this is the only way they can build an ADU, then they should be allowed to do that. Okay, sorry. And so I think this is one of the easiest ways for us to pilot urine diverting or composting toilets, anything that's diverting the waste is through an ADU. Partly they're new builds half the time. They're usually simpler builds. They're single floor. It's much less costly than having to retrofit an existing house. Right now in Falmouth, they're having to work with existing houses. And this is what gave me this idea. It was like, these are houses that people are already securely housed. And so we're getting data, which is really important for this new toilet technology, but it's not actually producing any housing in the process. But if we did it with ADUs as well, we could unlock more housing units and collect that data and possibly do it in a more affordable way. So I've been talking about this you do you concept, and I'm not, well, and one of the tour stops on Monday was a brand new ADU, not yet lived in, with a Phoenix composting that this woman designed so she would not have to spend the extra, whatever, tens of thousands of dollars for an IA system. So she got away from an IA by using this Phoenix, and it was a 2-story build, right? She had a basement. But again, the town's not getting nitrogen credit for that. So, but we did a tour that was with the state reps, and that really opened their mind, I think. The other options that we've heard among all of the members in our group is, can we use the county AmeriCorps housing that they're going to renovate? Can we put a toilet in that and start to pilot that way? Could we use public facilities like beach bathrooms, visitor centers, get the public to be, getting comfortable with this new fixture? What about partnering with the Wampanoag Nation, with their CDC and their housing orgs? Could their federal status allow them to bypass the need for a state DEP approval to pilot? Could they somehow fast track in a way that we are not able to right now and address their issues, which are very pressing around housing and wastewater? And also, could we do one-off pilots with very, early adopter homeowners in each town where they get a variance and a deed restriction if need be, but they pilot and they show for the town of Harwich, we're wanting to be that house in Harwich where we would do 2 different toilets and tour them through our house like Hilda and Earl do, and do that in each town, kind of make one pathway for one homeowner and see where that goes. So these are all the questions that we're going to, over the next couple of months, study and kind of synthesize together, along with these of what's the best technology for an ADU versus a multifamily, right? There's people that are on here that aren't just about ADUs. They're about housing, they're about water quality. So we're going to be exploring beyond ADUs, who has the authority to greenlight such a pilot? What are the pathways we need to solidify for gray water recycling? There's a group in Western Mass working on gray water legislation that I'm sitting on with. And how do we tie, Western Mass to the islands and the Cape with their rural and their seasonal communities designation? Laura, Kip Diggs was actually saying on the tour that he saw seasonal communities designation as a huge opportunity to figure out how to get this technology in. So I wanted to share that with you. What's the best pathway to get nitrogen credits attached to these fixtures? How do we get to the governor and the lieutenant governor to show them that their housing goals, their environmental goals of 2030, we're not meeting those, and we're not meeting them because there's this simple regulatory fix that they could help us out with, right? It's not simple, but in the scheme of things of other ways to go about this, if we could get the attention of somebody above the DEP, above the plumbing board, that understands that this tweak, this change in language, this recategorization could allow their goals to be met much quicker, I think that's an easy thing. We just need to figure out how do you communicate that. So speaking of what can we do? It's what is the one small thing that we can each do every day today that makes a difference? Going back to that strong towns framework of listening humbly and doing the next small thing over and over again. This is the quote that I come back to with all my work is Peter Block's. He does a lot of work with community development, but also he's done a lot of work with kind of organizational development. And he talks about how we are a community of possibilities. We're often just framing the problems. We're coming around the table to talk about these problems that we have, and yet we are filled with possibilities. And we have all the capacity, the expertise, the programs, the leaders, the regulations, the wealth that's required to end unnecessary suffering and create an alternative future. It's how do we engage all of those resources and reprioritize them and refocus them. And that's what I found in bringing this group together, is the wealth that's among us is just, that's inspiring on its own, you know? And I think so often we're sitting around a table that's in a structure that's facilitated, that kills the life force and the creativity of all the people, and it doesn't engage the expertise of those that are around that table. And so we're trying to do this a little differently this time. Here's just a quick, and I can share this PowerPoint, but these are all the books that kind of informed my work to date. It's not all of them, but these are my key ones. Everything from, you know, John Todd's work to community development, to indigenous systems thinking, to organizational development, permaculture as social change, is a great group of just, you know, innovative thinkers out there that we can learn from. Yes, so that's my presentation.
Wow, that was some presentation.
Hopefully it was not too fast.
No, it wasn't. Well, I guess we'll take questions now, if there are questions to ask of Talitha. If you could put your digital hand up, I can't see everybody at once here, so I guess when you put your digital hand up, you come to right next to my picture, so that'd be nice. Not seeing anybody. Oh, there we go. Laura.
Yeah, so I think what would be great for this group is to get a better idea of what can be done from the island to support the work that's going on, and also the things that can actually be done now that don't require DEP approval. Like, for instance, so most of our public facing, like Parks and Rec toilet facilities, are actually, they're either portable units or they're fixed units that have a pump out. They're not attached to a system. So there actually are systems that are approved, there are UD systems that are approved for use in Parks and Rec already in Massachusetts and as porta potties. So I agree that, like, getting folks used to that concept visibly is a really great step forward. And Provincetown is already using these portable toilets, from these portable urine diverting toilets. So the community is walking around town and they're seeing them. So
are you talking about the wasted ones?
Yeah, the wasted ones. So it's sort of demystifying the concept in a way that's already, you know, acceptable and allowable under state statute. So, you know, if this group is interested in advancing something like that here, connecting with the Land Bank, Sheriff's Meadow Foundation, all of the groups, you know, that have these toilet units accessible to the public, getting them into a group conversation about how can we make that less of a nitrogen dump, and how can we reduce the nitrogen there, because it's a primary part of their goals. And then also, you know, I know Island Housing Trust was looking into using those units on their job sites. We have untold hundreds of porta potties all over the island being used on job sites that are just like dumping nitrogen to wherever the outflow is going. So is there an opportunity there? So that part with, like, the public facing stuff that we can do now, and then, you know, what can the Water Alliance and the member groups like do to elevate the activity at state level towards advancing the approval of the technology for nitrogen credits.
Well, and my understanding, correct me, anyone on this call, is that Wasted got 4 municipal contracts for porta potties in towns. One was P-Town, one was Orleans, one was Chatham, and one was Wellfleet, maybe? No, Yarmouth. Yarmouth was the other one. But they did not get the approval in time, for last summer at least, to actually be urine diverting. The porta potties are there, but they're regular porta potties in the sense that they didn't get the approval to.
Okay.
And so we still are hitting that block at the.
Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay.
That's my understanding. I could be wrong. I haven't, you know, we're going to get on an EcoSam call shortly. I haven't heard that they got that approval, but I can check with them. But I still think that, that's a great idea in terms of, I mean, job sites is huge. I use the Martha's Vineyard examples all the time. So I'm trying to pull you guys in as like leaders, whether it's John Stanwood with, the Island Housing Trust piping the development, whether it's, the Lagoon Pond, like I'll use a lot of your documents. So I am so appreciative of the pioneering work you guys have done on the island. And I would love to thread you and our region or the whole Cape more so. I don't know if that's by Sherry kind of sitting in with our group and kind of pulling back and forth, but I think the stronger we can get across Cape and Islands around this and more cohesive, the better. I mean, partly just there's state reps that are representing both of our districts. But yeah, I appreciate you saying that, Laura.
Martina, I see you have your hand up.
I have a question slash comment. So I think that part of what I have observed on the Vineyard especially is that the lower and middle class families and people have only ability to, at least, in last 10 years, buy properties that are small in size. And by virtue of that, they are limited to number of bedrooms according to the, Title V septics. So even though they might have one of the biggest needs for ADUs for their family members, they don't have the ability under the current septic regulations. And so aside from the cost is also the restriction on the land and on the current regulations. So I would say specifically on the composting toilets and the thing about, how can we have additional unit or additional bedroom without necessarily impeding on the septic regulations. I think that's critical for, my community, I believe. And, I defer to the experts, but that's one observation I had. And, and so with that, I saw that the composting toilets are already approved for use. So how does that work with somebody having a septic? They have a 3-bedroom septic. They already have 3 bedrooms. Can they use composting toilet and with that propose the ADU? I'm just trying to educate myself on this.
Are you asking me, Martina? I will say that is above. I would say that's almost, in my experience, it's town specific. It's like talking to the health department in the town that you're wanting to do that, and to see. I mean, it's based on how they're able to interpret Title V to be, and that's partly what we're up against, is these 100 different septic interpretations across the state is what's encumbering the housing. Is how strict are they? Just in the 8 towns I work with, some are really strict and some are not, based on how the health department at the municipal level is interpreting Title V. So I don't know, in terms of it also not getting nitrogen credit. I don't know if Laura can speak to this about like how they would interpret that with Title V and flow and all that.
Yeah, so I think Sherry and I can speak to this a little bit, Talitha and Martina.
Awesome.
So we have a lot of areas on the island that have a bedroom cap because of nitrogen issues. And specifically, we've recently been getting a bunch of questions about the designated coastal district, which is a DCPC in Tisbury. And there's a 3-bedroom cap on any single family structure or any lot in that area. And there's nothing in the regs, right? There's nothing in the town statute right now that allows any difference for having a urine diverting toilet or an alternative system that would, keep the nitrogen from going into the groundwater. The bedroom cap is there because of the nitrogen issue, but there isn't yet an intersection of relief based on and Sherry, jump in if I'm misquoting this. This is based on the research that I just did recently. In that particular area, there's no opportunity for relief because of a different kind of system. But again, like Talitha said, that's going to vary from town to town. When I put my system in 30 years ago, I was only required to put in a 2-bedroom septic for a 3-bedroom house because I had a composting toilet system going in. So, but I also didn't need to show nitrogen. I didn't need to do additional nitrogen relief in order to achieve my bedroom count. Does that make sense? So there's parts of the island where, like Island Housing Trust, if they want to do a development, they can't do a certain bedroom size unless they offset the amount of nitrogen they're adding by doing additional mitigation either within that project or within that watershed.
Right.
So it's going to vary from town to town, but there are opportunities in some towns where using the system allows you to put in a smaller septic system for the bedroom count that you're going for. At least that's how it was 30 years ago. It's the nitrogen credit that's the real issue.
Oh, so exactly. So I'm specifically talking about existing structures wanting to add a bedroom, and I think, I don't know if it would have to be like a separate structure and not being tied to the septic whatsoever and just having a composting system. And would that be allowed? You know what I mean? Like right now you have 3-bedroom septic. You cannot have more bedrooms because of the nitrogen concern, right? But if you had, let's say, a guest house or ADU that was a separate structure, had a composting toilet, then why is it a problem?
Well,
Well,
you've still got kitchen,
yeah.
you've got shower, it's not just the toilet. So, and I see Drew has his hand up, so I think this would be a great thing for Drew to address.
Here,
Thank you.
Title V and nitrogen, and my ears perk up. So it's from a Board of Health perspective, it's a nuanced situation, but for an ADU that would ask for a composting toilet, it does still need a gray water system, which would still require a septic tank. So I've heard people complain that if I'm using a composting toilet, can't I just let it leach out into my lawn? And no, and unfortunately, that's not how Title V requires us to look at gray water systems. So it does still need, even if it's a reduced field and tank, it does still need some kind of holding capacity and leaching facility. Just it would be minimalized based on it being a gray water system, not a full Title V.
Can I say two things to piggyback off of that? So for the towns on Cape that are getting sewered, they're required to fill in their septic system with like, I don't know, is it cement? I don't know what they're filling it in with, but like basically we could be using these septics for the gray water if we have the gray water regulations aligned to be around recycling, which is in progress and is not, fully formulated. But by having people fill in these septics, then we're losing part of the equation that could be helping us with this emerging technology piece. Is my understanding from that is like seeing how do you reuse the septic in a way that we can, create gray water recycling using that, instead of seeing it as like we just have to fill it in and get rid of it. And that the understanding around the kitchen, I got that realization recently from a health director who said it's the fogs, the fat, oil, grease, and what solids, that if we were to turn our garage into an ADU with a stove, we would have to install the second tank because it's a secondary dwelling unit with a stove, which they then assume you have more fogs going into the septic. But if we were to design it as a detached 3rd bedroom with a kitchenette with no stove, we, according to how they're interpreting it, we would not have to have the separate tank. So that if we were in a different town would not fly. And that's the issue of like, it's also another equity issue of like, it's hinging on individual interpretations of this regulation right now. And sometimes it's strict because they want to prevent development. Sometimes it's just strict because it's how they're interpreting it. But it's kind of, I don't want to say willy-nilly, but you go over the town line and it's different sometimes. I don't know how it is on the Vineyard, but
Drew, is your hand still
Yeah,
up?
I mean, we're all of the boards of health here are in communication, and we're doing our best to remain consistent with each other.
that's great.
Outside of composting toilets, so just standard Title Vs with ADUs and what we have to do to address it. So on top of fogs, the way it was explained to me with ADUs and the requirements for a 2-compartment separate tank or tanks in a series is that because we have to now look at those as multi-family housing units, which is what those systems were already required for that type of housing. So with a secondary dwelling on your property, there comes, 2 families making food at the same time or washing dishes or doing laundry or taking showers. So the system has significantly less time in one tank to settle. So there's always a bunch of churning chaos going on, which leads to a more likely scenario where suspended solids, fats, oils, greases go into the outlet and down into the D box and slowly but surely just fail the system. So the reasoning for requiring those specific type of tanks for ADUs is to try our best to keep the longevity of the system in place so that there's still sufficient time for things to settle before it goes out into the facility, the leaching facility.
It's a great explanation. That's what my health director said essentially, but I could not say it as good as you did.
I've had to say it once or twice so far.
Sure you have.
John, go ahead.
Thanks. First, I don't know if it's Sherry now or whomever, but could you convert the screen back to the standard view, please?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And Talitha, I want to thank you for your presentation and the incredible work that you've done. Clearly, that's gone into that. I think it's great, and it's a model. I particularly applaud what's explicit and implicit in what you said in terms of inclusivity and creating a structure in which the participants are encouraged to participate and share their expertise as opposed to killing their spirits, as you put it, which I think is something that can happen all too often.
Thank you for getting that.
One throwaway comment, I scroll up by the source whom you quoted with respect to paradigm change. Just for the record, it seems to me that that's not accurate. It's not at the time that the innovators and groundbreakers who aren't, as you put it, afraid to, I guess, suffer the costs of breaking trail are making their efforts. I don't think the paradigms are dying. They're very alive and well. So I think they come to die later only because of the transformations affected by the power of performance of the alternative and innovative approaches of the people that don't subscribe to the paradigm.
How would you see that image being different than just the lower line being further to the right kind of deal?
Well, no, I was thinking of just the quote.
Oh, okay, yeah.
See who it was.
I know what you're saying. The top quote.
Yeah, at some point you quoted a source. But pursuant to that, I have a question which is to do with phosphorus. Here on the Vineyard, it's probably safe to say that there's a lower, this is totally a guess, but that there's a lower percentage of land that is close to freshwater ponds and kettle ponds and so on than there is on the Cape. And so it would seem to me that on the Cape, if anywhere, you will be extremely interested in the problem of phosphorus, which of course is the limiting nutrient for freshwater life. Yep. Now, urine diversion could obviously accomplish a lot in that respect. But I've found it interesting for decades that that phosphorus is the poor cousin. I understand it with respect to the primary significance of nitrogen for estuaries or here the great ponds. But I'm wondering if there's any prospect of incentivizing efforts to deal with it by having, say, phosphorus credit or promoting innovation and alternative systems that remove phosphorus. And are there data on the amount of phosphorus that are removed in the systems that you're talking about, like compost, and that people, trailblazers like Laura, have had, composting toilets here or on Edie?
I think that's a great point. I'm going to defer to Hilda and Earl if they're still on. I don't know about they might have walked away.
I don't see them. So Sherry and I have information on that, John. I think what we understand is that diverting the urine so that it never hits the groundwater instantly prevents 50% of the phosphorus load from human waste from ever going into the ground. Yeah. So it's a significant reduction just by diverting the urine itself.
Yeah,
So
I've seen 50 to 65%, depending on who's quoting that. Yeah.
yeah,
And I
so
think it also depends on the fixture in terms of how much it's being clearly diverted versus, they talk about user error if it's the design of the fixture misses some of the urine. But
so I think that's why. So Rich Earth Institute uses the 50% number, and I feel like they're a pretty reliable source that
yeah,
it's 80% of the nitrogen by just diverting the urine, and 50% phosphorus reduction by just diverting the urine. That's before you're even looking at full composting systems that are also diverting the solids. But and Sherry, I don't know if you're able to hop on here or if you're doing something else right now to sort of weigh in on this, but I feel like John, I think that's a really great question, and it's something that's coming up consistently in conversations here around the interest in UD because we see what's happening in our ponds, and so much of that is due to the phosphorus load. And IA systems, for all the amazing work they do removing nitrogen, don't actually have a component that mitigates phosphorus. So we're not actually tackling that problem if we're just focusing on the IA systems. And I know Mass TC is doing a lot of work with phosphorus reduction, but I feel like there's an opportunity here to really elevate the concerns around phosphorus in the conversations. And work with DEP to, I feel like it's one of the key tools to advancing this technology, actually.
I would agree. I mean, I think there's not a lot of, I just had a meeting with our regional group last night, and one of the guys is on the board of APCC. He's on the local Harwich Pond Association, and they are not, their biggest action step is to pump your septic system. Like, people are not aware this technology exists and can take the phosphorus out at the levels it can. I think so much of this is education and public awareness and the way we're framing it. I mean, the meeting I'm not on that's happening simultaneously right now is the Rich Earth's eco-sanitation call about communication, PR. How do you market this technology in a way that turns people on versus off? And I will be honest, it is not hard to turn people onto this. You talk about the financial benefits, you talk about the water clearing benefits, you talk about the water conservation benefits, you talk about the economic benefits with the fertilizer. I mean, there's so many ways that you can figure out what is this person's in on this, that it's very easy to sell. But the phosphorus, I agree, is like this, step cousin that people I don't know why it's not getting as much traction, especially in our neck of the woods with all of our kettle ponds and whatnot.
I think the night my impression over the many decades is that as I said, it's because a lot of this got started because of the impacts on the Great Ponds,
Yeah.
or over there on the estuaries, and because of economic impact and otherwise, and indeed nitrogen is the primary issue, and so the poor cousin certainly was phosphorus, and all the effort that went into nitrogen, which was considerable, to make it an issue that people acknowledge along the lines of what you just stated is needing to be done and relatively now, I think, because of generational change and background education that people have more readily accepted and understood. But with respect to phosphorus, I think one of the issues, the great ponds here are fed by fresh water. And so it's the impact on the fresh water and then coming into those ponds and the fact that they're brackish. I mean, they're not marine environments and they're not freshwater environments, but they have the freshwater component.
Yeah.
There is a system that the very sadly, absurdly now late Michael Loberg was behind with his Clean 2 technology. They have the technology that I know is in the pipeline, whatever stage it's in, that removes, as I understand it, 99 or something percent of nitrogen. But they also, I was told by John King, the engineer with Clean 2, that several years ago, that they have something that can do the same that he developed to remove phosphorus. It's just nowhere near as far along, and that's because of the hegemony of nitrogen with all of this. But it is there.
I think the one thing I wanted to mention that I saw in Connor Lawley from Nutrient Networks, his presentation at the Rich Earth Summit was talking about public benefit, like this being considered under the category of public benefit, like energy, electric kind of, incentives for homeowners, right? Like getting those rebates for like a heat pump. And we're far beyond or far behind the energy wave in terms of that being considered alternative and now more mainstream. Like there's so many more ways that they're ahead with that, but to use it as a model to see this as a public benefit, and how can we incentivize homeowners or towns to do this? Like somebody in Orleans was saying, we have 19 homes that are contributing to the death of this one pond, and yet we're choosing to sewer the entire district to deal with 19 homes, and it's millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. If we took a fraction of that, paid for all of those 19 homes to be refitted with these toilets, we would have money for fire stations, for schools, for, all the things we're struggling at a town level. When you look up what are the top 5 municipalities in the state with the highest debt, it's Orleans and Chatham in the top 5, and it's because of wastewater. So that's where the Strong Towns book, I highly recommend reading it. He talks a lot about this concept of the infrastructure cult, of how we have framed infrastructure in the country and sold infrastructure projects. And they're very complicated, and they're very multi-stage and a ton of dollars, but we also frame them as a ton of jobs, rightly so. But we don't frame them to the taxpayers of what the actual debt load is in total and how long that goes on, which is infinity, because once you start this project, it never ends. You always are having to furbish, renovate, build a new pump station, whatever it is. It's an ongoing debt load. And so looking at that really reframed for me as a taxpayer in Harwich of like, we have sewer going on. It hasn't hit our tax bills yet. It hits next year. And that's what one of the women, I love this, one of the women that was involved in that 1988 town dump pilot, right? And this is a fascinating technology that bridges the massive political divide we have right now. She and I would not agree on anything politically except for this. She got emotional about this pilot and how this was the biggest point of pride in her career and the biggest regret that it didn't move forward. And she is one of those people that's sitting on a cesspool and doesn't want to be, but can't figure out financially how to be able to upgrade that, but would in a heartbeat put something like they did at the dump at a micro level in her house, right? Like, and she's the one who was saying this conversation is going to be a whole other level in our town once it hits the tax bills. Right now it's just theoretical, and people don't have anything to spare in our budgets, and if the financial piece to me is the biggest selling point to the majority of people. The environmentalists get it no matter what, but the kind of regular person who is not considered this, when you tell them the cost differential, it makes them pause and it gets them on board usually. Yeah. That's what we're finding, at least in talking among this group that we're assembling.
Okay, sorry I had to miss part of that meeting. This meeting to go to this meeting. Had a whole conversation about urine diversion in that other meeting though with the DEP for our grants people. So Richard, we're closing in on 2:00. Do we have anything else on our agenda or any other?
I don't know. Does anybody have any news about their organization's activities or anything we haven't read in the paper? Doesn't look like it.
Can I make one correction about a piece of that conversation, just really quick?
Yeah, what did I get wrong? I'm sorry.
No. It was just so at some point we were talking about IA systems and specifically referencing nitrogen. So IA systems are just anything that diverts from the normal of Title V. So even every leaching field that we install on Martha's Vineyard is technically an IA system because it is not the standard PVC pipe with pea stone underneath it. So denitrification is a component of some of these IA systems, but there is also, at least in a piloting program, some phosphorus removal IA systems. So they are looking at them. It seems like it would just be another septic tank to put into your current, regular septic tank, denitrification tank, and then you have your fun third new phosphorus tank. But it does look like they are working on some phosphorus removal systems. And there are IA leaching fields that eject the water up into the grass roots, which I'm being told doesn't specifically have a number on nitrogen or phosphorus removal, but does remove from the groundwater because the grass roots absorb all of the nutrients, which leads me to a question about the presentation and maybe a question for Sherry too. Do eco machines still exist from John Todd? Are
They do.
They
Can I
do?
just tell you, if anyone's interested, I'm going to lead a tour, hopefully, really far away. But I talked to the head of the Omega Retreat Center in Rhinebeck, New York, and they had one installed in 2009. He co-designed it with John Todd. He said it processes 50,000 gallons of waste a day. And since it opened in 2009, 100 million gallons. I asked him what the issues were because I've seen a lot of them have closed down. He said he's had no issues. He said a lot of the ones that are no longer in existence were started as kind of a testing center or a pilot grant to get it started. And then, whether it was like change in leadership or whatnot, he said he would leave private tours for anyone who's interested at any time. I'm also going to try and see if he'll zoom into the group. So if that's the case, I can let you know about that meeting, Drew.
Okay. I looked him up because his someone who he was related to lives in Tisbury. So I went down the rabbit hole of his whole career in eco machines. But at Tisbury, I looked into it. Seems like at least at Tajmu has like a perfect spot for eco machines, which is kind of Sherry, where I was going to ask you a question about how Maggie's doing with the biochar in Upper Tajmu. But there's Tajmu has a large pond and then a smaller pond up top that's separated by a small strip of land with a herring run going right through it, which to me just seems like it would be if eco machines still existed and were used, would be a no-brainer for a place where you could pump water from Tajmu, have it go through the eco machine, come back into the Upper Tajmu, and then go back through the herring run, which would hopefully help with the nutrients.
I just literally met John Todd via Zoom last week and started to tell him about this work and kind of how I've been learning about his projects. He has a focus on the Cape again. So if you give me your information, Drew, I can connect with him and see, he's, put together some proposals because he didn't just do the work at our transfer station. He did work at the pond that got killed by the lagoon waste. He did the Restorer, which was the floating version of kind of the living machine on a raft. And so that's what I think he's focused on. Don't quote me on that, but he's wanting to do several projects on the Cape. So he's still kicking around with these ideas for sure. And if you have something on the Vineyard, I wonder if he'd be interested.
Okay. Yeah.
Either Sherry can give me your contact information, or if you put it in the text and
I'll put it in the chat. It's disabled. I will send it to Sherry to send to you.
I put my info in the chat, so if you grab that.
Perfect.
Because part of what it is like we had this conversation last night at the dinner. Everybody assumes the first Falmouth pilot got basically described as it wasn't successful. The same with the Harwich pilot. If you dig deeper, that's not the accurate story. And so they get used to shoot down this emerging technology when they actually created an amazing amount of data. And in the case of Harwich, he went on to go all over the world with what he learned at our dump, right? I mean, this guy at Omega, Skip Backus, he designed the wastewater treatment facility for Richard Branson's private island with John Todd, right? It all started on Cape. And it's not, just because one town decided that they didn't want to move forward with it got approved by the DEP, right? I mean, this was a massive innovation. You got a national award from the EPA for this. So I think it's really important to unearth these things that other people think are dead in the water and mine them for gold of what do we, 3 decades later, we're hopefully smarter and we can apply this in a way that if you see that in this specific region of the Vineyard, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very, very much. This was quite the presentation. We're just at almost 2:00, and I think we've learned a lot. I think
Thank you for having me.
you're very welcome.
I've learned a lot as well from you all, and I will continue to try and thread the two regions together and show what you guys are pioneering with, because it's impressive.
Yep, we have a great team out here too. So
You seem to, yeah. Have a wonderful holiday and end of your year, you guys, and I hope you have a great start to 2026.
well, thank you. Same to you and same to everybody else on the call. Very happy. Almost 2026. Holy smokes. What happened?
Nice to meet you all. Bye-bye.
Talitha, by the way,
Bye.
it's Rudolph Barrow.
Yes,
Or
that quote.
BAHRO, to whom I was referring his quote. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank
Great
you
to
so
see
much,
everybody.
John. Your comments meant a lot. Thank you.
Welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again. See you all.
Bye.